A to Z Mysteries, Super Edition 3, White House Whiteout by Ron Roy. Chapter 8. Josh, Ruth Rose, Casey, and Marshall all tried to back out of the cave at the same time. They tripped over each other's feet as they tried to escape. The snowmobile's headlights created frantic shadows on the snow. Dink was knocked to the ground. He felt Josh crawling over him. Then he heard a bark. Were they being attacked by wolves too? "Natasha!" Casey cried. More barking. Dink sat up. Natasha was lying on top of Casey, covering her face with kisses. The dog's red sweater was caked with ice and snow. As the other kids watched, Natasha stopped licking Casey's face. The dog whimpered once, then rolled over into the snow. "Something's the matter with her," Marshall said, crawling over to Casey. The man and woman climbed off their snowmobiles. Dink realized that they were not Ace and Joe Payne after all. The man was too short for one thing, and his voice sounded young when he said, "Your dog is awesome. She let us hear from a mile away." He was wearing some kind of padded snowsuit that zipped up the front. Ski goggles and a helmet covered most of his face. Only his eyes showed. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose were kneeling in the snow next to Natasha, who wasn't moving. Casey was stroking Natasha's icy fur and whispering in her ear. "What's wrong with her?" Casey asked. "Probably hypothermia," the woman said. She was dressed like the man in ski goggles and a helmet. Dink realized they were teenagers. "I'm Lauren, and this is my brother Tinker." "Hypothermia can be pretty bad," her brother said. "One of my buddies got lost in the snow last year. It was real cold and he stayed out way too long. When he didn't come home, his folks called the cops. They found him asleep in a snowbank. His face was blue and his temperature was way down. He almost died." "Oh no!" Casey cried. "Don't worry," Tinker said. "We'll get your dog to our house. Mom knows a lot about animals. It'll be cool. Let's load her up on my snowmobile." "We can take you all," Lauren said, "but you'll have to sit on top of each other. What are you kids doing out here anyway?" "It's a long story," Dink said. "Cool, but tell us later," Dink said. "Let's hit the road." Dink and Casey wrapped Natasha in one of the packing blankets. Tinker carried the bundle to his snowmobile and held her on his lap. Dink, Josh, and Casey scrunched together in the passenger section behind Tinker's seat. Marshall and Ruth Rose climbed on the other snowmobile behind Lauren. In moments, they were skimming over the snowy road. Dink's eyes blurred as they whipped past trees and snow-covered fields. The moonlight made everything seem like a dream. 10 minutes later, Tinker aimed his snowmobile up a long plow driveway. At the end sat a small house. Dink smelled smoke from the chimney. Lights were on, glowing through the windows. Tinker and Lauren parked their snowmobiles near the porch, and the kids jumped off. Tinker carried Natasha up the snowy front steps. A Christmas wreath hung on the door. Lauren opened the door, and everyone clattered in. "Boots off, you two," a voice called from another room. "And you said you'd be home by 11. Tinker kicked out of his boots, then laid Natasha on a rug in front of the fireplace. 4 stockings hung from the mantel. In the fireplace itself, a small wood fire crackled. Dink noticed a Christmas tree in one corner, with a few wrapped presents arranged on a red cloth. "Mom, I have a surprise for you," Tinker yelled toward the next room. He grinned at the others. A tall woman stepped into the room. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt with a parrot on the front. She stopped when she saw 5 strange kids. dripping snow onto her rug. "Usually he brings me baby squirrels or orphaned birds," she said. "Who do we have here?" The 5 wet, cold kids introduced themselves. "We found them in a snowbank," Lauren said. "Their dog led us right to them." "What dog?" her mother asked. Lauren pointed to the blanket on the hearth. Her mom knelt by the dog and carefully unwrapped the blanket. She forced Natasha's eyes open, then her mouth. "Lauren and Tinker, find some dry clothes for your friends." Lauren followed her brother to the 2nd floor. "Will she be all right?" Casey asked. The woman sat back on her feet. "Yes, sweetie," she said. "Your dog's just exhausted and very cold. We'll have her fixed up in a jiffy." She took a close look at the 5 kids. "Lordy, you all look like you've been through a war," she said. "We got kidnapped," Marshall said. "Wait, we want to hear," Tinker said. He rushed into the room with an armful of sweatpants. Lauren was right behind him. She dropped a pile of sweatshirts on the sofa. "Okay, you kids all get into warm stuff now," Lauren and Tinker's mom ordered. "Lauren, why don't you make a pot of hot chocolate? Tinker, we need more firewood." Mrs. Dink started to say. "I'm Molly Makepeace," the woman said. "Mrs. Makepeace, could we make a couple of phone calls?" Dink went on. "Our parents don't know where we are." "Sure, sweetie," Molly Makepeace said. "Use the phone in the kitchen." The 5 kids quickly pulled on 2 large sweatshirts and pants. Dink and Casey went to the kitchen to find the phone. "You first," Dink said. Then he went back to wait in the living room. Everyone was gathered around Natasha, who was sitting up and licking faces. Casey stepped into the living room with the phone. My stepfather wants to know what town we're in." "Tell him Maple Crossing, Virginia," Molly Makepeace said. "We're number 15 Fox Run Drive." Casey repeated the address into the phone, then listened for a reply. "He wants to know if there's a place to land a helicopter," Casey said. "Your dad has a helicopter?" Tinker said. "There's a big field behind the house," Molly said. "Plenty of room to land there. Tell him we'll have lights on." Casey finished and hung up. "They'll be here in a half hour. He promised to call your father at the hotel," Casey told Dink. "And your parents are at the White House already, Marshall." Dink smiled. He could just see his dad chatting with the president. "White House? Kidnapped?" Molly Makepeace said. "What's going on here?" "Well, the president is," Casey started to say. "Wait," Lauren said. "The hot chocolate. Don't say anything till I get back." Soon they all had mugs of hot chocolate. Natasha was sitting up against Casey's knees. "Okay, kids, tell us how you know the president," Molly Makepeace said. "He's my stepfather," Casey said. "Last year, he and my mom fell in love and got married." "So you live in the White House?" Lauren asked. Casey grinned. "Yep." "And you got kidnapped?" Tinker said. "All 5 of you?" The kids kept interrupting each other as they told the whole story. Natasha perked up her ears when they got to the part about her being locked in the crate. When they were finished, Molly and the 2 teenagers just stared. "That is the most amazing story I ever heard," Molly said. "And you managed to get away from that man and woman. Do you know who they are?" "Her name is Josephine Payne," Dink said. "I found papers in her glove compartment, and I heard her call him Ace. I think the guy lives near here." "Ace Boyd," Tinker yelled. "He's a total wacko. He and my dad got in a big fight when Ace tried to shoot some wild turkeys in our property." "You know him?" Ruth Rose asked. "Everybody around here knows Ace Boyd," Molly said. "But no one wants to know him. He manages to make enemies wherever he sets foot." "I've seen him throwing his trash in our field," Lauren said. "Ace Boyd belongs in jail." "I guess he and Joe Payne planned to kidnap Natasha," when Joe was hanging wreaths in the White House, Dink said. Yeah, and we went along for the ride, Josh added. That's the last time I do anything nice for you, Natasha. Josh gave the dog a big kiss on her head. How did you find her? Marshall asked Tinker and Lorden. Tinker smiled. Dude, your dog found us, he said. Lorden and I were out doing some night snowmobiling. It got too windy, so we decided to come back here. Next thing I know, this thing, all covered in ice, jumps in front of me. I almost fell off my snowmobile. I thought it was a grizzly bear come to eat me. She barked at us and kept backing away like she was trying to say something, Lorden said. Finally, we just followed her until we saw you guys. Casey gave Natasha a smooch. You're my heroine, she said. I'm going to make you some Christmas doggy cookies. Speaking of eating, when is the last time you five had a meal? Molly asked. Yesterday, Josh said. We ate around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Ruth Rose said. But our friend Josh is like a baby bird. He has to eat every 5 minutes. How do soup and sandwiches sound? Molly asked, heading toward the kitchen. And blueberry pie? Can I come and live with you guys? Josh asked.